I see some thumbs up there. Please type or thumbs down very clearly if you're not okay with being recorded, or turn off your camera. Okay, great. So, and I think I believe that Amanda's going to start sharing slides, and Julie and Amanda are going to take it from here for a few minutes with us.
Hi again, everyone. Amanda, is there anything you want to say before I start telling the origin story?
Nope, I think we're good to go.
Okay, awesome. I was asked by the planning crew of this orientation call to share a little bit about how the collaborative started, because the way that we started is important, I guess, to our story and to where we have moved to now. So the origin story is kind of wrapped up in my own personal story because it happened when I was working for another organization called Heifer International. And I guess at its simplest, the reason that the Northern Manitoba Food Culture Community Collaborative exists is because the status quo was not working in terms of getting support to communities in Northern Manitoba, specifically from the philanthropic sector. I was in a job for a charitable organization called Heifer International Canada, the Canada Country Program, and I was literally tasked with delivering support. It was an organization that had a nice big granting budget, delivering support to urban agriculture, small scale family farming, and Indigenous led agricultural initiatives. And I was being invited into communities, spending a lot of time into First Nations communities, particularly spending a lot of time in those communities in northern and remote northern Manitoba. I was all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, totally had a good dose of white savior complex going on. I was all excited to come up and be a helper and like solve people's problems or work with them to solve problems. And after working with a few awesome patient people, particularly from Mantosipi Cree Nation, what I realized is I was working for a funder who was tasked to get funding to this community, and there were basically so many hoops that the community had to jump through or boxes they had to check before they would get their literal check, that it almost made it impossible, or actually it did make it impossible for the community to receive the supportive funds that I was tasked with delivering. So I'm really grateful to have had some good mentors at the time who helped me think about that and do things like talk with community about how we would improve this. So Northern Manitoba was being highly underserved by the philanthropic sector. I literally was not coming across any other charitable funders funding community-led work in Northern Manitoba. There may have been some, they were invisible to me if they existed. There were a few funders who were showing up to deliver programs that they ran. So say a charitable organization, I'm just making this up now, but they ran like canoe camps for kids. They would like come up and say, hey, do you want our canoe camp for kids? So there was that kind of support, but not really funding support for community-led initiatives. And yet I was working in the philanthropic sector, attending like conferences like the Philanthropic Foundations of Canada, and knowing that there were tons of active funders across Canada that wanted to support Indigenous-led community-led work, particularly around food sovereignty. So where was the disconnect? Why wasn't this happening in the places where I was showing up? And those elders that were guiding me, they encouraged me to ask community partners, like, what do you really want to see in a helper? So bullet number 2 there says communities requested helper partnerships to work relationally and collaboratively. Again and again and again, when I talk to folks, after having built trust and showed up numerous times, so people believed I was going to keep showing up, people would share, we just want to work relationally with other humans, like these portals or writing a proposal form and just waiting to hear, it doesn't really work for us. We want to work relationally. And there are lots of do-gooders who sometimes show up on the morning plane and leave on the afternoon plane, and it's exhausting. They show up with their own agendas. We don't get a chance to express who we are or what we want. And it would be really great if all you like do-gooders from far away would work together and share learnings and take some of the pressure off of us to try and get a word in edgewise or share what it is that we feel is truly important, what we're trying to do in our nation and our community. So at the same time, I'm at these funder conferences hearing from awesome deep-pocketed funders from across Canada who are like, oh, we just really want to fund Indigenous food sovereignty work. So I just kept turning around like, what is the disconnect here? So basically the status quo wasn't working. The next slide talks a little bit about what we actually built. So it was considered pretty radical at the time, and I'm thrilled that collaboratives are not a radical thing at this point in time, but it was considered radical. So in 2013, we did a pilot and we tested a community-informed, funder-led collaborative. That was the way it was framed. The idea was multiple funders would work together, put their money in the same pot, not have it like this is my money, this is your money, you know, and sort of hold on to it, but put it in that communal pot or bank account and then work together to make allocations of that money and do work together to make those allocations in a way that is really, really highly informed and led by community. So there were 3 groups that wanted to test it out in that pilot year. Shockingly, the province of Manitoba was not usually known as a leading edge kind of creative thinker, but they were right in there through some awesome invested bureaucrats. And the Northern Healthy Foods Initiative program, which is part of Province Manitoba, partnered with Heifer International Canada, where I was working, and a little supportive evaluation, Winnipeg-based evaluation organization called Health in Common. So we tried this. We pooled, our total pool was about $50,000. And we asked for help from a number of awesome community folks that we had previous relationships with, including some people who are still Northern advisors to the collaborative this very day. And found that communities had a better experience working with us in this pooled fund relational way of working, and found it was a lot of extra work to do it this way, or it took time that maybe it wasn't efficient in the way you can't just go fast when you're working together. You got to talk things through. You have to make decisions together. So it took more time, but it seemed like a better way of working for the communities that we were partnering with and for the funders as well. This collaborative has from the beginning been guided by community partners in terms of what's important, what to think about, how to run it. And it is still guided by the Northern advisors. And we do our best to center community voices and community needs in all our ways of working. Since the collaborative started in that pilot year, we have grown. Once we realized it was working a bit better for communities and funders were getting some learning out of it, we expanded. McConnell was one of the next partners in, but this just shows a little bit of the growth. We like growing natural things, so we used a tree to show the growth analogy of the collaborative. So in 2013, it was a small pilot, tested it out, and over time, it has grown to have well over a dozen collaborators or funder organizations who are members of this collaborative. 8 Northern advisors, 6 staff, and more than 50 community partners. On the previous page, there was an image of the theory of change. And I just wanted to share one of the things that has been there it is. One of the things that's been really important along the way is we actually didn't figure out all the details in the beginning. We tried to figure out a bunch of the details and realized we didn't know what we didn't know. So we didn't actually have a theory of change, shared values, shared ways of working until the 4th year of operations of this collaborative. The first 5 years were very gentle, intentional, slow growth, wanting to do it well and really root it all in learning. And just the other point I will make about the origin story, when we were first sitting, all these organizations that were keen to do this and build this new collaborator funder pooled money collaborative, we realized some organization has to take on certain responsibilities. Somebody needs to hold the bank account, somebody needs to hold the HR contract. So originally, Heifer International Canada took on that hosting role. And fortunately slash unfortunately, Heifer International Canada decided there's no more work to be done in Canada. They just switched to a purely fundraising model instead of a program delivery model. So in 2014, the members of the collaborative asked me to look for a new home for it, a host. And a friend of mine, whose name's Steve Ellis, had just started working for Tides Canada. It sounded like a good fit. Tides Canada was one of 3 organizations that we interviewed for the role of host. And Tides Canada, now called Makeway, was ultimately chosen because Makeway wanted to be an active contributing member, and they had the ability to provide financial support, hold the bank account, hold the HR contract. So Makeway is a member of this collaborative and acts as the host organization of the collaborative. So that's just a little bit about our origin story. Yeah, it was just interesting at the time how many people said, like, that's never going to work. You're just, why are you spending time building this thing that's never going to work? And it's not perfect, but we have learned a lot and delivered a lot of support for community-led partners. So to clearly reiterate, there's 2 main reasons why we exist. The first main reason was to be getting really good philanthropic support to communities in Northern Manitoba. The dollars and the wraparound supports. That was a gap that wasn't being filled properly prior to the collaborative. So that is one of our North Stars that we have to hold and do a really good job at. And this is a picture of one of our partners in the Thompson area at the Senior Resource Center. They're building some raised garden boxes together, I think just this spring, or this is a very recent picture. So folks working together to build up their community. The other main reason that this collaborative exists is to support collaborator or funder learning and unlearning. So one gap was the dollars weren't getting to Northern Manitoba, the support wasn't getting to Northern Manitoba. The other gap was most of the funders were really far away from these places and had a lot of learning to do and unlearning to do. And communities were saying, please do that work and do it together. Don't do it in silos. So we, as a collaborative, support community-led work, and we also support collaborators to engage in that learning and unlearning together through their support of community work. The collaborative, to fulfill those 2 main reasons for being, we have 5 basic actions that we take. These are basically the 5 things that we do. One is funding to communities. So providing flexible funding to community-led work. We run 1 annual granting process and an emergent granting process, usually about once a year, and make sure that our budget is, the largest part of our budget is always granting dollars to communities. So getting that funding money into places where people haven't had access to that kind of support. As we were doing that work, we kept asking communities, what else can we do to help? And early on, like in year 1 or 2, many communities made it clear that our help in positive story sharing was something that they really craved and wanted. Lots of our community partners, folks will talk about, like, it's just the crappy negative stuff that gets out there. And there's so many beautiful things happening. We're working hard together. Help us do some positive story sharing. So just a plug, if you haven't checked out our new website, there's just oodles of resources on there. We have very specific protocols on how we support story sharing. It's always with the community partner in the lead, but story sharing has been an important action that we take. We also support north to north, or gatherings in the north for our community partners, and self-representation at gatherings. It's still very common to hear about a conference that's about northern issues and being held in Winnipeg. And many of our partners are just like tired of getting on planes or getting in a car and heading all the way to Winnipeg to hear experts from far away talk about things that are supposed to benefit northern communities. So we invest our resources in folks getting together in their nations with each other in the north and sharing the knowledge that is already in the communities with each other. And we also hold some money for folks to get out to particular gatherings where self-representation is really important. It is shocking how many times through the course of a year our team would get asked to go to an event and speak about work happening in the north. So we try and do our best to make sure when we get those invitations, basically we see if community partners want to be the ones to come out and talk about their work. So it's not us doing it. And then, of course, the immersive learning and unlearning is an important action that is threaded through a lot of the things that we do. And finally, in the beginning, like I said, this was a fairly radical collaborative, and many of the original collaborators around the table said, like, we got to document what we're doing. We have to share this out. We have to support systems change. We can't just do our little thing in our bubble in Northern Manitoba and not share what we're learning. So sharing what we're learning, creating products or items that can be shared broadly across the philanthropic sector, across government sectors for systems change has been something that's been important to us from the beginning. And I'm going to stop there and pass it along.
And that's me up next. And I'm very mindful of the time because some of us do need to flee immediately at 1:30. So what I am going to cover are the roles and responsibilities of collaborative members and really who's around the table. But I would direct you to the terms of reference document. It is all there. You can reference it later. So I'll relatively quickly go through this and just give some reinforcing points from the perspective of a collaborative member. And we'll leave time for Kelly to go through a little bit more about how we do our work. So we use the web analogy because really we are an interconnected group of people coming around community support, and each of us play our roles, but they are mutually reinforcing and beneficial, and we're strong and supportive together. So you are experiencing the very strong support that comes from staff today. We are looking at a PowerPoint presentation that they developed with input from me and Kelly, and you can go to staff team slide, please, Amanda, maybe. And staff, of course, is here today, so supporting what we're doing. And we do typically, like that web shows, when we do our work, everyone is around the table. We don't hive off and kind of do things in silos. Of course, the staff team is working together on their administrative roles, on supporting communities, collaborators, the processes. But they, as our main point of contact, are always working with each of the groups and people around the web. And they do all the great things like the new website that's been developed, the publications that we see, and all of the wrangling that goes into making sure that we're on calls and the committees are struck and the grant applications come in and are reviewed and all of that kind of stuff. You, I'm sure, can imagine everything that goes into what is produced through the collaborative. Staff has a role in. We also, because as we've heard from Julie and the origin story, our Northern advisors are so integral to what we do, and they're a huge, support and a guidance through everything that we do. And as collaborative members and all of the new folks, the way you'll mostly interact with Northern advisors is that they will be on the grant committee calls. But beyond that, they're helping staff and coming together in community and really kind of guiding and setting the strategic direction. There is a resource for all of us. They bring forward critical thinking points that we should be contemplating and weaving into the work. And they're really just so essential. And as we heard from Irvin on the top, and we'll hear him close out, we really consider them the elder voice in the collaborative, that really kind of bring their insights and provide context for everything that we do. They're Northerners themselves, they're in community themselves, and they bring that sage advice and wisdom and guidance to everything we do. And that all leads into kind of why we're all here, and that's the community partners. They're, for us that are grant makers, these are the grantees, but it's so much beyond that. Folks in community are bringing forth what is needed, wanted, required, dreamed of in community, and bringing forth those ideas for community-driven solutions. And as collaborative members, as staff, as community Northern advisors, and I'll talk about peer reviewers in a sec. Once a community partner is a community partner, they're always a community partner. They're always in the web. We've captured them in the web, as it were. So there are past, there's present, there's future community partners. We continue to champion communities that and their work that have previously received funding, but they're still in the fold, as it were. Still communicate and are in relation with them. We have our present grantees, as it were, in communities that are being supported currently financially, but also relationally. And then future, we're always, nurturing relationships and preparing communities to join the NNFCCC family and become grant recipients, but part of that web of knowledge holders, of doers, and community champions. As Julie said from the very beginning of the collaborative, there are Northern advisors who now take on that role and are called that, but have been in the fold the whole time, really growing the organization. And it has been an iterative process. As Julie said, that, for the first few years, the theory of change was not necessarily developed. And one of the things that has evolved out of the whole process, and as more communities have joined the collaborative, what has more recently come out is peer reviewers. And those are folks from communities that have significant Northern experience. They've probably been recipients of support in the past, and they share their knowledge and with the collaborative by reviewing the grant applications that come in, and Kelly will touch on that a little bit deeper when we talk about decision making. But the peer reviewers from a collaborative member who has received their notes on grant applications, it's a really great evolution to have their expertise, and they make notes, they review the grant applications before they come to the committee for decision, and they have been fabulous in amplifying the voices of Northern communities who are seeking project support, and have been a really kind of lovely evolution of keeping people engaged and continuing to support communities and lift them up. So the way you'll see what peer reviewers do is in their notes on the grant applications that come to us in the committees, which Kelly will talk about. Keep a little bit bleeding in. Sorry, Kelly. Which leads me to us, collaborative members, the new folks on the call today, and why we're doing this orientation. So as collaborative members, we can be used to we're funders. We review grant applications. We have various governance and operational and administrative cultures within our own organization. But when we come together as collaborative members within NRCCC, we sometimes need to put away our scrutiny and be more builders and well, next slide. The kind of analogy I gave is that we're not here to poke holes, we're here to fill them. And so when we come together in this forum, we're asking folks beyond the pooling of resources, we know how to get money places, but when we're in this web of folks collaborating, we're stewarding funds, we're on committees making grant decisions. But we ask, when we come around the table to do this work, that we come with open hearts and open minds, and really kind of center the community voices, center the community needs in what we're trying to do. And that often means looking at, and again, Kelly's going to talk about grant committees, but when we're in those grant committee meetings, we are listening, we're open-minded, we're trusting that the community knows best, and what they're asking for is what they need. And that when we're reviewing, and we go through a slow process, as the theory of change calls for, and we revisit the applications and we really go through them in detail, but that when we're doing that, our mindset is how can we help make this a successful project for these organizations. And that's where we all come together, and we have the Northern advisors on the calls, we have staff on the calls that have been working with these communities on their applications for months, if not years, before they come to us. And we have the peer reviewers' notes. Sometimes the peer reviewer is on the calls with us themselves, but that we all come together and work with each other in those mutually beneficial ways to see success for the communities who are seeking our assistance and wanting to be in relationship with us. So that's super quick because I am watching the time, but as I said, it is in the terms of reference document. You can always reference that, and I do want to send it over to Kelly, because there's so much opportunity for collaborators to engage, and you bring your skills, your knowledge to the table, and we have a particular way of working through. But kind of the thing that we absolutely must have you engaged for is the grant committees. So Kelly, am I
That's
segueing
perfect.
to you
You
okay
did
now?
perfect, yes.
Yeah.
Megan had a
Good.
hard job because trying to describe like the work that you do or like how you show up in the role that you play without before me telling you what it is that you're actually doing.
Yeah.
But so thank you so much. So yeah, so you know, as Megan said, you know, well actually I should start by saying like the term that we're using here all the time is collaborator, right? And you're not a funder or like a grantor or something. Like this is very much for a reason, like because as a collaborator evokes the idea that you're involved. And we really, really are. And so, you know, at perfect segue, I think like one of the biggest the biggest and most important role and responsibility for all of us is to make those decisions on the grant applications each year. And so just very specifically to say, we form small committees. I think it's usually 6. I'm looking at the staff team. I think it's usually 6 small committees. And then we receive all of the applications and they're divvied out between the 6 committees. So I might be working with one, you know, Allison this year and Florian, or someone like some other collaborators the next year. But then with my collaborator peers on that committee, I'll also be joined by NMFCCC staff and a peer reviewer and a Northern advisor. Typically, that's sort of the what you're doing. And we're really responsible for reviewing those proposals from communities. And we use consensus-based decision-making in those committees. So that's, you know, if everyone is agreeing, or maybe we have some questions, or maybe it's a real thumbs down if you really need to block this project for some reason. One thing I'll like up until now, and I don't know, I can't speak to going forwards, but there's typically most years been enough resources to go around. So we don't need to block things for lack of resources or for scarcity. It really is a space of abundance. And the idea is that even if we're unable to, for a number of reasons of, you know, alignment or readiness or whatever, unable to support a certain application moving forward, you know, blocking it doesn't mean like giving up on that altogether. It means that really that, like Megan said, like that applicant or that community is now in the web, and there's other ways that we can support, and whether that be through learning and shared knowledge, connecting them with other communities, doing similar, having similar ambitions, etc. So that's sort of the ethos of the of those granting decisions. And then I think I just, you know, to go a little bit deeper on some of how that is constructed, I wanted to kind of catch you up on some recent conversations that we had last year around decision-making power in those granting committees. There's been over the past year this big theme of conversations amongst collaborative members around decision-making power and who holds it, how can it be more community-based and community-centered. There's, you know, many collaborators were asking, why we're from down south, we don't really know the realities as well. Like, is it inappropriate for us to be holding that power and responsibility to be saying which communities are getting granted and getting resources? And initially, and I'll say I was one of those folks was saying, I think that responsibility should be held in community members themselves. Like, shouldn't it be the Northern Advisors' responsibility? And through a number of conversations, really, really beautiful, like rich conversations of learning, um, the the message was no, actually, like decision making in the granting committees, sorry, is not a responsibility that Northern advisors or peer Northern advisors wanted. They're there to provide coaching and support and ensure that the process is done well, and that you know, people and us, we are evolving our thinking, but they don't want to be picking and choosing between their own communities when it comes to like resource allocations. So that was sort of a big, an aha for me. And their role is to really establish good ways of working and teach us how to do that. That not their responsibility to read all the proposals and think about the proposed work and pick and choose, like I said. So that's our responsibility. So I can't speak for everyone. Again, I'm using I here. But I know actually that I wouldn't spend as much time going deep and learning about the proposed work in the applications. I would read them, but I wouldn't go as far as like really, really like researching the communities and learning about the projects and where else similar projects, and going back in my notes from previous years and going, oh, this one did a hydroponics project too. And like, I wouldn't be leaning in as much if I didn't have that responsibility to be making decisions if that was given to someone else. So I think, it's that decision was, was really kind of pulled apart last year and looked at from many angles. And that's why we currently have the model where, so how that decision ended by the end of last year was that now, yep, we really thought about this. We really, okay, it is still the responsibility of collaborators to make the decisions on grant applications. And there will always be peer reviewers in the granting committees answering questions and helping us. And those peer reviewers have the option. I'm just looking at Christy and making sure that this is correct. Have the option to, if they would like to, participate in the consensus-based decision making. But if they don't want to, they can excuse themselves and just be, I'm here to provide insight into the realities of this project. So that's sort of like a good kind of conversation that I think is important for us as collaborators to kind of know is live, and these kinds of things happen, like these kinds of conversations happen, and you'll probably be part of them too as we figure out as trust-based philanthropy and power dynamics continue evolving in this philanthropic space. And Dana has a question.
Thanks. I was just going to ask, are you going to be able to share about timelines in terms of when these committees meet and timing and involvement there?
Sure. So typically the big push, the big annual granting happens. We get our package just before the holiday break in December, and then we review in January, and I think decision-making meetings happen in February. Is that sort of the rough timeline, Christy?
End of January usually, and then
January.
It's been like February 1st where us staff can share out the decisions to communities.
So that's sort of how and then there's maybe an emergent grant cycle later in the year too for a smaller number of proposals that may come in throughout the year that need more time sensitive attention, but not everyone needs to be involved in that one. So you have two opportunities. One is like a requirement sort of or an expectation, and one is optional. And Amanda's in just a second going to go into other optional opportunities too. I just wanted to also share just in this theme of continual learning and improving our practices as funders. I have found my experience in the collaborative to be very useful because I can bring to these conversations things that we're having conversations about internally here at McConnell around power and justice and modern grant making, and at the same time be in a place where we're really trying to push the envelope and test some of these new things out. So that power conversation that we had last year, another one last year was around sort of the colonial format of receiving grant applications. It was all written format. And one of the Northern advisors, Jim, sort of called that out to us and said, hey, like, this is not appropriate for a lot of community members. Is there another way? And challenged us to think better, think bigger and more creatively outside of the box of just, and so that allowed us to start to experiment with oral-based applications. So, this is the space of we're in constant iteration and learning and evolving in this space, and it really is a rich place of learning. And I think these changes in funder practices are reciprocal and bidirectional, because we're bringing things, we're learning things, and there's a real richness in that to draw on the wisdom that each of you has from your experience in philanthropy, as well as what we're learning from community members, from the peer reviewers, and from the Northern advisors. Okay, so I think that's all that I wanted to say on that. And so that, again, that's that's the most important role that you play as a collaborator, but there's other opportunities to get deeper involved if you wish. So Amanda's going to describe a couple of those.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, so we recognize that each collaborative member, partner has different capacity, and each of you as individuals have different capacities and skills to bring and areas that you want to learn around. So we just kind of encourage you to take opportunities when they arise and kind of fit with what's on your plate. So Kelly mentioned a couple of areas that have happened in the past. I think right now there's a few collaborators working with Christy on some theory of change evolution. Some folks have been working with Omar on a little bit of a research around shifting practices and how your involvement with the collaborative has kind of influenced the way your foundation or organizations have worked. The emerging grant cycle was mentioned. Another big opportunity is the learning trip that's coming up in September. So if you are able to attend that, that would be amazing. And then coming into that space, kind of letting us know if you have more time or availability to help with the planning beforehand, or wanting to be a helper during the week, or even afterwards, gathering reflections and doing some story sharing around that. And the story sharing is also a big part of it, whether it's working with a community partner on some kind of resource, there would be space for that, or sharing about learning that you have done or your organization has done. The last thing I'll kind of mention is there are often opportunities to engage in other ways. We could talk about smaller trips to community partners or gatherings that are happening. So if you're not able to make the learning trip, if September is just not a good time, but you do want to be building relationships with staff and Northern advisors and community partners, we can find other times that would work for that to happen in a good way. Just let us know. There's often one staff traveling somewhere every week, so there's lots of opportunities there. Or if you have other ideas on how to engage or share about the collaborative a little bit more, or areas of work that you would find beneficial for your organization as well, just let us know. Yeah, so we're going to pivot a little bit because we are coming up to half past the hour. I just wanted to say thank you to Kelly and Megan for stepping up and helping us put this together. This was the first orientation session. So if you have feedback on it, please also send it our way. And a heads up that the next kind of group of new collaborators will be calling on some of you to help. Maybe, we'll see. That's all I have. So I think I'll turn it to Irvin to, sorry, there's a thing, to close us off, and feel free to connect with us, any of us on the team, if you have follow-up questions or had things to share during the call.
And
Irvin?
sorry. I was just going to say, Kelly, probably you as well. Email Kelly or I as well as collaborative members who have been here for a while. If you have just nitty gritty nuts and bolts questions, we didn't have time for the breakout where we could answer questions that are burning on your mind. So do send them, please. That would be great. Thank you. It's great to see you all here. Sorry, Amanda and Irvin. Go ahead.
That was a great session, great chat. Welcome everybody. Welcome new collaborators. Thank you for your involvement and being involved with our work. I've told the staff multiple times, like, that because of the collaborative, I learned more about my neighbors, surrounding communities, than I have, going through school and life. I've been given opportunities to meet people that are facing the same challenges that I'm facing, and it's opened my eyes, and it's allowed me to, gather myself as a person that would be vocal and to become that leader for my community. Back in 2018, I ran for mayor for Leaf Rapids, and I served one year under that term because there was a lot of disagreements. But even after I lost my mayoralship, I still continued to work for my community, just because I know that if I don't do it, there's not going to be anybody else that'll do it. And today, I'm still serving my community in a different form, and that's how I see collaborators, people that are helping the community at a local level and allowing people like me opportunities to make more people like me, to encourage people to be like me, to go out there and challenge yourself. I was not able to speak publicly. I wasn't able to come out of my shell until I was given those opportunities. And with the collaborative, I feel like that's what people can get, is opportunity. That's something they never had before. It is an underserved place. It's a place that's beautiful, but it's been asked to become something it's not. It's not able to be like the cities down south, where you have these different infrastructures. You have access to healthcare, you have access to clean drinking water and affordable food and housing. It's very limited access up here. But with a collaborative, it allows people to see what they can have if they work together, if they start to build themselves and their community. And that's why the collaborative is so important. I know, and I feel like it's the most important thing for the North. And I thank you all for listening to me and inviting me to this orientation.
Thank you, Irvin.
Thank you, Irvin.
Thank you, Irvin. And thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Looking forward to seeing many of you. Looking forward to seeing you, Irvin, in person, and hopefully everyone, as many of you as possible, at the learning trip in September. And if not, on whatever committee calls or opportunities for collaboration, which we undoubtedly there will be over the next few months and years together. So welcome aboard.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, Irvin.